All right, we should be starting. All right, I hope everybody had something to eat on lunch. So, welcome back. So the next session is about the Control Center, this new product of ours, and it's interesting to hear your reactions. So please and come and talk to me after the presentation tomorrow or today, and really would love to hear what you think about it. Is this useful for you? So we were asking in a couple of past years, you guys on a survey, why do you use Vaadin? And we had something like 300 answers, and compiling the statistics from those, it was looking like the top reason, or there was two top reasons. The first one was that I can do stuff with Vaadin that I couldn't do otherwise, more like on the UI space. And the second connected one was that with Vaadin, I'm pretty much getting double productivity out of this. So that's nice, but there are also some problems remaining, and I hope that Control Center might be closing some of those problems. But let's start from the building part, because that part have been pretty good. So let's build a new application for myself for basically tracking my status. And it's easy with Vaadin. We can just can start a new project and add a dashboard in there. And yeah, we have a project, so we can go and download that. And with Control Center, if you want to use that, it might be useful to also click the Control Center box in there so we get all the right dependencies. So it's going to be Joonas US application. So I download it, I open up an IDE and start coding. Or at least maybe first we should be starting the hot swap mode that Mark was mentioning, and then we can start coding. It takes a while to restart, and then we have application, we can get it from there. But this is not the session about how to build an application, but just wanted to highlight that it's actually fairly easy to get started. You guys already know how to code with Vaadin, so you know that part. The more challenging part is how do I actually get to deploy this application? So how do I get in one of these clouds? Maybe first question, anybody is putting their production applications to one of these clouds? 1/3. Anybody putting to any other clouds? Oh, interesting. Who is running on-prem? All right, that mapped out the room, so 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 or something like that. Who thinks it's easy to get Vaadin running in this? You guys are in the wrong session, so. My feeling has always been that there is a downside to Java. So Java is a awesome foundation to build on, but when you ask Java guys that, hey, where do you deploying this, it always leads to awkward moments, and especially if you want to deploy the production and make it robust and scalable and so forth. Either it's expensive or it's complicated. So we wanted to start tackling this problem a bit, but maybe first just to touch why it is the case. So when you are building an application, you're just looking at your application code. And underneath, Vaadin does all kinds of stuff that hopefully makes it easier, and then Spring makes, again, all kinds of stuff that hopefully makes it easier. But it goes more, like Java and operating systems, and there is a kernel in there, and then you need some hardware to run it on. And then eventually you need some load balancer to actually get the traffic to your particular server, and maybe there needs to be a certificate, and then there's all kinds of firewalls and routing and domain names. It goes deep, and while every part of these are easy, it's a lot of work. But hopefully clouds, or luckily clouds, they have been abstracting away from this lowest level, so you might be getting a lot of this for free. So if you build an application like this, at least you have the top layers in there. And if you go and deploy that to, let's say, Amazon EC2, and you have like 16 gigs of RAM, 4 cores, it costs like $1,300 a year, roughly speaking. So it's not just a basic server. And you can run I don't know, 10,000 concurrent users with Vaadin Flow on such a server. So that's nice and dandy. So it's not too expensive to host it. Except that typically you need like multiple servers because one of these might be going down. Maybe there are other reasons as well why you want to it's not just like for scaling it up, but it's more around making it a robust deployment. And when you have 3 servers in there, you probably need also some database somewhere and some kind of load balancer, and then you start to have so many servers that you probably need to be some kind of orchestration as well. So now we have like, I don't know, 7 servers in there. That times 1,300 starts to be costing real money. And obviously nobody's doing like this, so they basically put it in containers, and containers have been awesome abstraction that pretty much makes it cheap to run huge number of containers within one fairly simple machine. So even if you put containerize it, you still need like multiple nodes for it, because if your server goes down that has all the containers, you know what happens. So you probably want to distribute these to multiple nodes. And with multiple nodes, you again need some kind of control plane that is figuring out where to run which payload, and so it's again becoming a bit complicated. So you have questions like, how do I set up the network and firewalls in there, and how do I scale it? It's like automated scaling. Where is the storage and certificates and secrets and logs, and there's tons and tons of stuff, and you start looking like this again. At least I'm starting to look like this again when I'm trying to get something to production. So this is the problem that we try to start solving with Vaadin Control Center. I think it would be unfair to say to make deployments easy. I would love to say that, but I think make deployments easier. That may be a fair way of doing that. So how does it look like? So we have this application we built, Joonas status application. So how to deploy with Control Center? We go to control.joonas.us. Don't tell this URL to my wife, that would be disaster, like how to control Joonas. So we just log in, and when we get to the Control Center, we click, hey, let's manage the applications, let's deploy our application, and we can give it a name, like status, and then we need to give it an image, so where the kind of package where our application is, and where you want to deploy that, and then a certificate so that you can actually access that without any errors. And then we click deploy, and that should be it. So it takes a little bit to download it, and after that you can actually go and see this running. It's actually running live today, but it's nothing much. So I hope that we could make it that easy, but obviously there are a lot of magic behind it. So the first questions arising from that is, how do I build this container that we deployed? So that's kind of straightforward. You guys are building the production all the time, so you just Maven package to production. And in order to then run this in any container environment, you have to be building an image for it. So with Docker build, you can build it and you can give it a name and a version number. Although this is kind of problematic. If I'm building that on my laptop, it's going to be like ARM image, and if I'm deploying that to a cloud that doesn't necessarily have the same architecture, it's better to build it with build.x and give the platform names in there. And we still need the name and the version number. Who is actually using build.x at the moment for building their images? Is that like 2-3 guys? So in order to use that, you just need to be installing a builder in there, and it's like one line of one command, and you get to build multi-platform images. And in the end of it, you need to be pushing this into some repository where you can deploy this from. So in this case, I'm just pushing to Docker Hub, but you might want to use some repository provided by your cloud vendor. So in order to build this, you need some kind of build configurations or Docker file, and it's kind of simple because Vaadin generates one for you automatically, but just to take a look in there. It's a name of the image that you're building on, what you're copying in there, what port you are exposing, and how do you start it. So it's kind of super simple file, but you can kind of extend on this and add anything in there you want to. So actually we could see how this looks like. So just to kind of demonstrate that this is actually pretty simple, just a couple of commands, and it takes, in a good laptop, Josh's laptop, it takes under a minute to have all of this done. So that's that part. Let me, we can skip forward because then we just push it to a repository. So the part that is, at least for me, was and is always kind of a bit tricky or certificate. Who has been using Let's Encrypt? Almost everybody. Okay, great. So it's just like what I'm using is certbot, and it's one line command, and you get forward with that. But you guys are already building certificates, so certificate part was easy. All right, so that's pretty much like all of it. You need to be installing Control Center, clicking deploy, and then you have it in there. Sounds like we are done. The dirty secret in Control Center is that it's nothing much in a way. So the Control Center is just something that wraps around Kubernetes. Kubernetes is, who's using Kubernetes, by the way, today? 1/3, 1/4, something like that. So what we do is we build on top of this awesome infrastructure, Kubernetes, and we wrap it around and try to make it a bit simpler. And the good side of this is that we are not really inventing anything new. So you can always go through Vaadin Control Center and just do anything that you want with Kubernetes directly as well. So this is just like a convenience to get you started, and hopefully a platform that we can add more value in. So who has Kubernetes, access to Kubernetes cluster right now? Just a couple of guys. So for rest of us, the simplest way to get Kubernetes is that you, in Docker desktop, just go and click, hey, enable Kubernetes, and then you have Kubernetes. So let's use that and install Control Center. So we go to documentation, copy command for Helm for actually installing this, and then we can go and open Vaadin Control Center installer. We had to be kind of copying a password from there as well to be making sure that it's actually us. So it gives you this wizard where you set up a host name. So maybe I'll pause in there. So we configure a Keycloak instance for you. So basically to make it easy to authenticate to the Control Center, and if you want also to your application. And when you are installing Keycloak, you actually need a real host name. So in my case, because now running on my laptop, I just added to etc hosts file a name for it, keycloak.local, and with that we can install this. Also, we need a root user, so we just create a new username in there, and then we click one button, install Control Center. So what happens in there is that it starts installing everything that's needed for hosting a Vaadin application. So let's take a look. I'm just using this open source tool called K9S to see what's happening in the cluster. So it looks like we are installing like certification management. We installed the ingress based on Nginx, Postgres for storing our identities and so forth and so forth. So all kinds of things are being installed for you automatically and wired together automatically. So who has been writing a YAML configuration file for Kubernetes in the last few months? Some. Did you enjoy it? Yeah, so basically what Control Center does, it kind of sets up all the basics for you. Instead of you writing all those configuration files, we give you like best practice configuration. And so we do this while we are installing this Control Center, and when we have installed this, we can log into there. This is a local installation. I didn't give a certificate for my Keycloak, so it shows that it's not secure, but it's local, so we don't care about that. So when we get in there, we can use just the identity that we just created to log in, and then we have a control center where we can basically install our application. But obviously this is local, so it doesn't really help us much to install our laptop. So me being cheap, what would be the next step is find a cheap way of hosting this. And one cheap way of hosting this is just like put it on a Raspberry Pi or something. So I actually have this Raspberry Pi running on my garage at the moment. I think it's like 4 gigs of RAM that is enough for running a Kubernetes cluster where you can deploy Vaadin application. So that's like the lowest end. So my point is just that it is not like you don't really need like this big data center for running these, but it can be running on your phone basically. But for a more realistic scenario, you want to have a real cloud service, and all the cloud services, they provide a Kubernetes API nowadays. So just for an example, setting up a cluster here in DigitalOcean. So going there and setting up a cluster in Frankfurt. So it's as easy as going to their console, choosing what type of nodes I want. Maybe just one node is enough in this case, and clicking create a cluster button. And let's see. So let's create a cluster. And what happens in there is that then it instantiates all the nodes, all the infrastructure that I need for hosting my application. It takes a while, at least with this node type in DigitalOcean, it took like 7 minutes, so I cut this down a bit. It shows you all kinds of tutorials while it's deploying, but in the end of the day, what you get is a config file from there. So when it gets done provisioning those nodes, so I'm basically creating my server, I can go and download this config file. And this config file is pretty much like a private key that you can use to access your cluster. So I'll go and download it, and if I point config environment variable to this config file, then I can just run all the tools against it. So again, I can just install Helm in the exact same way as before, and we can do all the same things that we did previously. So just gonna skip ahead a bit because we did this already once for a local. So it's exact same process. You just go and install it, and in the end of the install, you go and you have a control center that you can log into. All right, so we now have a Kubernetes cluster and a control center, so we can build an application and deploy that. One more note is that when we release new versions of Control Center, latest is 101 that is bundled in Vaadin 24.5, you can go and upgrade this as well. So you can use Helm upgrade command, and it might actually be that we have a 102 already, maybe. We were just kind of having a chat about building a new version of that. So what's under the hood of a Kubernetes cluster? Not everybody raised their hands, but it sounds like a 2/3 or 3/4 of the people didn't really have access to Kubernetes at the moment. So like really quick summary of Kubernetes, it's an orchestrator that is orchestrating your nodes. So if we had this 3-node setup with, 7 pods in there, so 7 kind of, in Kubernetes, one pod is something that contains one or more containers in there. So if we have like 7 pods in 3 nodes, we need to have a control plane for that, and in the terms of Kubernetes, it looks a bit like this. So it's a bit ugly picture, but it's coming right from their documentation. So each of these nodes, they, in addition to running your containers, basically your application that we just built in there, there is a kubelet that is kind of managing the pod, all the resources, how much is there, and kind of setting up your pods and pulling them down and so forth. So this is like the controller of the node, and then there's a proxy that manages all the networking for your services in there. And then we have the control plane that stores all the configuration. It it can run scheduled jobs and manages disk storage and so forth. So it does tons and tons and tons of stuff for you. So basically abstracts away from any cloud infrastructure. And to me, it seems like this became the lingua franca of all the hosting, so it can do everything for you there. So if we take a look inside what's in the cluster that we just created with this K9S, you can see that there is a tons of pods running for us. Some of these are basically running their system, so to help us to basically kind of keep this running like DNS and that type of things. And some of these are installed by Control Center, and in there, it's a bit kind of confusing view because there are so much stuff. So if we can actually take the same view in the Vaadin Control Center, just go and see applications in your cluster. It just lists what are the applications that you have. So it's a bit of a simplified view to the same thing. Then again, we can go and see this status application that we just created and dive in there and see basically what is happening in there. So it shows your logs, and so this is just a Spring Boot application. It shows you Tomcat and it shows what we coded in there. So you can kind of see the logs. And again, you can see the same thing from Vaadin Control Center. So it's just like a wrapper around it. And if you want to kind of dive deeper into that, we can see the exact configuration the Vaadin Control Center created for you. So you can tweak anything. So you can actually go and edit this as a YAML file. So basically, the idea is that Control Center makes it easy and sets this up for you. And after that, if you want to tweak something further, there's no boundaries. You can do anything. You can even turn off the Control Center. It keeps working. So it's a kind of simple way to get started. So one thing to do is to scale this. So now we just installed one server running this, or one node running this. So we can scale it in the most easiest way. We just choose our application, choose that we need 3 replicas instead, and click update. And just by these 2 clicks, we now spun off 2 more servers that are now starting up and then running the same application. We automatically set these to be sticky sessions so that we route the traffic to the right place, and it just works. So there is also ingress controllers in there. We install an ingress controller called Nginx for you. So this is basically receiving all the traffic regarding your applications and then routing these to right pods, right Tomcats, so in there. And if you dive into that, you can actually see all the ingress log files that kind of show on the ingress level on what is happening in your application. It might be useful, for example, if you have a problem with your certificate, you can see that the certificate was not loaded correctly and it was not terminated in the ingress level. So you can kind of debug that type of things in there. Obviously, you can just change the configuration yourself. Whatever you want to kind of do, you can always go through and edit those on the Kubernetes cluster directly. So for the 3/3 or 3/4 of the audience who wasn't using Kubernetes at the moment, should you? I found this study. This is like 1-year-old study that I found interesting. Interesting because this own audience in here was really similar to this room. So 80% of these were building web apps, and 74% of these were using Java for that. So that sounded like a relevant statistics. So the first thing that they asked was how many of these companies are using containers, and it looks like roughly 5 years ago everybody started using containers. Actually, how many of you are using containers in production? Half, more. Most people. How about in development? Do you use it during development time as well? A bit less. So looks like the most popular option for managing those containers in production is already Kubernetes, like with the large margin. So 64% are using Kubernetes. So it seems like that kind of won over the market. So there is wonderful cloud infrastructure underneath the Kubernetes, but it seems like the Kubernetes became the API for all of that infrastructure. And I think it's a good thing because it makes it easier for you to kind of freely choose where you're hosting things. But there are pain points. So people don't like maintaining YAML files by hand. It's tricky, and at least for me, there are so many things that you can configure, and it's kind of fragile on how you get it to work. And also, like when you start tuning, how do you actually run it? Is it performant? There is so much details that you can have. So hopefully we can kind of alleviate some of that pain for developers if they want to directly go and deploy their applications to production. But the control center, it's more than just deploying to Kubernetes. So we want to kind of see this as a foundation. So this is more of where we want to go next rather than what we have right now. So the first thing that control center does is deployment. So in there you can already today use it to deploy to most clouds, any in-house Kubernetes cluster. So that part is there already. There is a kind of it sets the production setup for you, like we install with the one button click, it installed you the servers in there. We can do some basic management, and if that basic management is not enough, you can go through and just manage directly in the Kubernetes cluster. What we don't have right now in there is rolling updates. That's something that we'll be adding next in there. So right now the updates are like you have to be manually managing those. But deployment is the first part. The second part that I'm excited about and is what we will be focusing next is monitoring. So really seeing the health of your application. It should be sending you emails when there is something bad happening in your application, so that you take a proactive action fixing it. Everything is between like performance of your, if some kind of call starts to take like several seconds, it would be good that you hear about it rather than you hear it through your boss saying that the customers are complaining. We have this AppSec kit that can keep checking at your dependencies if there are kind of new bugs found in those. We plan to kind of move and kind of integrate that inside Control Center so that it can actually send you an email that, haha, now one of your dependencies have been noticed to have a security bug. But we can also kind of log everything that is happening related to security in there. Same goes with audit logging, so we can have isolated audit logs where development team might not even have any access to make any changes there. And the final piece is kind of unintuitive, but that's maybe what I'm mostly excited about. So we want to build full stack functionality, meaning that instead of just like grids and checkboxes and all kind of small UI components, we could build larger components as well. And one of these components is user management, and that we actually included now out of the box with Control Center. So you kind of get user management with a click of a button by starting to use Control Center. But we can do more. We can have like feature flag management in there. We are planning to have all kinds of AI components. So basically, like this doc example from the previous presentation, a RAG chat could be a component that you could just plug into your application, and then you could manage all the data sources, a vector database through Control Center UI in your application. And we actually have a ready also translation functionality. So in Control Center, your translators, people who are translating applications in several languages, they can log into Control Center, see what needs to be translated, and do that in staging. But there is a separate talk about that. But let's take a look at the user management model that we have in there. So the vision in there is like one click to turn security on for your application. In reality, there are a couple of clicks, but maybe we get to there with one click only. So this is how it's supposed to be working. This is what we're working today. So we choose our application, we'll deploy a new version of that, and turn on the identity management, and now we have security in the application. So if we switch over to the application view and see, I already created their user for myself, and a group where the user is, admin group, and role, admin role for this user. So I can kind of go and in UI manage, add new roles and so forth. So when I run this application and go to a view that is protected, it automatically gives you login screen so that you have to be logging in. So this didn't really require any work on your part to just turn the security on. So there is still, because I needed to deploy a new version of my application, so let's see how that was done. So this is our application that we just created in the beginning of the presentation. So let's create a new view in there. We go to roots and create a new view. And this is just a flow-based view where we choose access control to be just admin role, and the admin role was already added to control center. So when we create a new view, I mean, this is just a blank view, so let's maybe drag there something. So in this case, we are dragging those cards. This is actually flow-based, so Mark showed you those cards being added in React, but this actually coded the same view in full-blown flow. And the only thing that we need to be taking care of this is that we have see that there is the role allows annotation. So that's the only part that you have to be doing yourself. So you add roles allowed, and in this case, I'm just adding that to menu because I'm managing that manually. But the only thing to do for the user management part is add that roles allowed annotation, and with that we have an application that actually has security. So it's kind of simple. There is so there are a couple of security annotations. You know these already, but I just want to kind of collect these. So anonymous allowed, anybody can access that view. Permit all, so it requires you to log in, and roles allowed, it also requires you to have certain role. So right now there is still a small limitation as of yesterday. We have to be manually adding their navigation access control. It's just one line of code. I heard that it's gonna be remove this limitation by tomorrow, so we'll have a new version deployed. So this is hopefully yesterday's news. And another thing that we needed to do by hand is add login and logout button. It basically kind of depends where you want to put these. So we'll add those to startvaadin.com's template, and that should be kind of automated for you as well. You might want to listen to Spring events for when somebody logs in and hide a button, and when they log out and hide another button. But that's about it. That's everything that you needed to be really actually implementing. So that's the security part. There's also some really nice convenience features in there. So this is, if we go to identity management, we also have open ID-based logins and social logins. So let's add a Google login here. We just choose Google, and we click this link, so it kind of leads to Google's management console. And in there, we just need to be copying our configuration. So as you can see, I did leave my client secret in there. We are all friends in this room, so we can share the client's secret apparently as well. So we just kind of copy those secrets, the client ID and the secret in there to the management console, and to the control center. Control center shows a couple of redirect URLs that you have to be copying back to Google, and that's it. Then you click save, and you implement the Google login. So if I go to the same application now and click login, it actually added a Google button in there. And I can go and log in with Google, and the nice thing was that it also did merge of my account. So if I had an email-based login for my email address and I used the same Google address, it actually asked, do you want to merge? And it handles all these kind of interactions for your users. What else do we have in there? So So we also implemented two-factor authentication. So again, you can just go and this time choose an account, and you can say that, hey, I want to have multi-factor authentication for this. And again, it's just like I turn this on, and after that it just works. So if I now log in, after logging in, it actually asks me to scan a QR code, and it creates this for me automatically. So you get a lot of convenience features that would be a bit of a pain in the ass to implement your application if you want to do all those by hand. All right, so that was the security that we have in there. There's more features in there that we implemented. This is like the first version, so user management based on databases, email addresses, full Spring security support, password change requests, two-factor authentication, social logins, federated logins, and there is actually full key cloak behind the scenes, so you can use any feature from there as well. So it's like, again, we are a small wrapper, thin wrapper on top of the actual infrastructure, and you can utilize all of it from there. And for another example on what the control center can do, we have introduction features in there, but Rolf is going to be talking about that later today, actually next. So that's everything that I had for the Vaadin Control Center. I think we have some time for questions as well. Any questions? Josh, there in back. Yeah, we are obsessed about reindeers, so you might have noticed. So we actually ended up creating in-house video editor that turns any videos to these kind of animations. It's not part of the control center though. Should be. Any other questions? Yeah. I don't. I think, Stephen, you have the microphone. Yeah, you speak loud, please. Yeah, it's a good question. We have, it's not implemented yet, but what we are going to be implementing there is that you can upload a new theme. Yeah, so the question was, how can you change the login theme for your application? So what we are planning to add to Control Center shortly is that you can upload a new theme in there, and basically the theme is based on HTML templates, so you can basically change anything in there. In addition to that, if you just want to change some colors and put a new icon in there, you can also upload those separately, so you don't have to implement the full theme for it. Any other questions? There. Yeah. Or something which already covers these features or parts of them. So is this for developers only, or do you intend this for small shops? Yeah, the latter two. So yeah, so who is the target group for this? So we would like to kind of expand what the developers can do. So we did that in the past by kind of pulling back-end developers to also be able to do front-end, and turns out that for many deployments are hard, and now world is shifting that everything is becoming Kubernetes, but Kubernetes are still fairly hard. So we like to make it like an easy start for deployment, and I hope that more development teams can take ops. Also, they can also expand to do ops, so that they don't need a like separate team for that. For big corporations where they actually have these kind of IT teams that are operating applications, they are kind of outside of the target group. So sure, I hope that they install Control Center, but for now we mostly want to kind of help developers to get started with this. That's a good question. Did I miss that part? I did. I should have had a slide about how do you get it. I had it and I apparently deleted it. So Control Center it's bundled with 24.5. You can go to documentation and basically there is like step-by-step instructions on how do you install that. It's pretty much one Helm command and you can get started. And part of that is the question, what does it cost? And the good answer is it's free, so it's included in Vaadin. Some of the features, like two-factor authentication, a couple of features that are only part of the paid subscriptions, but mostly it's free at the moment. Or I mean, that's wrong statement. So it's not at the moment, it's going to be free forever, so yeah. Any other questions? I have a question. Has anybody tried this out yet? One? Try it out. It would be super interesting to hear what you think about it. And because this is like a beginning of something new where we hope to be able to add more and more functionality. So I'm sure that there are all kinds of limitations today, so it would be great to hear about those and so that we can start building this the right direction. All right, I guess that covers it. So thank you everybody, and we have a coffee break. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So let me repeat. So we have a coffee break right now, and in 15 minutes we start with this session. All right, thank you.